Good afternoon. Доброго дня, Vakayeva. We will have Shaun join us in a bit. We're actually having to go early because Shaun's busy traveling, actually. We're getting ready to travel anyway. And we always have updates coming out. There's just a lot going on. And of course, um, we have a full broadcast coming up later tonight. Hope that you will join. I'm trying to get all of this stuff to actually behave. Bear with me. Actually, I'm going to get one gadget that I need for communication with you guys. See, there goes the browser trying to talk to us at the same time. 1 second. It is a crazy Friday. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good morning so far. It is a crazy Friday. I hope you're doing well. Here comes the browser fucking repeat. Good morning so far. It's weird to hear yourself. Kill that audio so I don't have to hear that. Anyway, as I said, Shaun will be joining us in a minute. He just got finished with an interview, I believe. And I want to be able to see what you guys are up to and say hello. I can see in the chats when you're ready. We've got some different headlines happening. Of course, one of the biggest ones has been the negotiations or the submission talks, depending on how you want to call it. And watching the United States demand Zelensky capitulate stolen land from Russia, and constantly hearing that the demands of the United States are exactly mirroring the Kremlin. No deviation, no push. Literally telling Ukrainians, you cannot get this terrain back. Just capitulate is the exact opposite of bravery, exact opposite of principles, exact opposite of freedom. And at the same time, watching that, good morning, mockers. At the same time, watching that, like we said the other day, Rubio is deployed immediately to go to the most corrupt country in the European Union, Hungary. And then following up behind that, a country only 2 notches up in the lowest bottom scale of corruption in Slovakia, shows their lack of seriousness about freedom and democracy and all those things that obviously the administration hates. So, I know that in many ways it feels like we've said this 1,000 times and 1,000 times over. They're complicit in these crimes at this point. In addition, we had several strikes this week that were across the country, and I'm looking at some commentary from friends of mine that were in Kharkiv region. And let's see. Also, I'm noticing I'm getting more reboosting commentary about someone else's post that I don't mind reboosting, but the numbers are stagnant now on the last few days on this account. And I don't like to say it to gripe or to bitch. I'm very thankful we got the numbers where we're at, but it just basically went up and just kind of stopped. I looked at Facebook the other day, and today, I literally have to send the messages to different people that in Messenger, because the platforms are preventing boosting. They are preventing even being seen. And it's not, I try to be very clear, it's not a pro-Ukraine, anti-Ukraine thing at all, on at least on Facebook. It's anything that's not Meta does not get an outside, or it has an outside link, does not get any views unless your friends are literally stopping to look at your account, or you pass it on to them. And so it requires a little extra bump from the supporters to make sure that that information is out. Same thing on the Apartheid Clyde platform. I wake up every morning and I see Nancy Mace in the White House and Stephen Chong and every right winger that I do not subscribe to, that I, in fact, do not even engage with. I get all of those. I rarely get to see yours. I only see yours if I literally go look or I keep scrolling, and it's like 5, 6, 7 of that evil fascist timeline versus the timeline that I read. And I know that you can flip to the part of follow only, but it shouldn't be that way. And we know that Apartheid Clyde is doing everything he can to make sure that the platform is rigged. So you have to try to do what you can to outsmart that by finding those voices that are reporting and making sure that they get boosted. I don't report because I feel I am important. I report because the journalism necessary to cover Ukraine is a daily job. I know Ukrainians who have a strong set of needs, from whether it's the electrical system under the winter attacks or the return of defenders and children, the stopping of the war, the fact that Mikhail Fedorov just said that Pac 3s are running out. All of these things are very important. You need as close to the ground reporting as possible. Additionally, for instance, von der Leyen was here. Ursula von der Leyen was here this week, and I'm going to call out, not by name, but by at least by the action. That the other day I watched a supporter attacking her as having done nothing for Ukraine in words versus actions, when in fact Ursula von der Leyen has been a consistent supporter at action level. You can disagree with certain actions, like, for instance, the idea of the frozen assets of Russia being used and liquidated, or profits from it, is a discussion that can be had, and you can disagree with it. But the one thing you can't say is that she hasn't taken action. She literally is here in the country and physically comes here, including on February 24th, was just yards away from me at the memorial event, and then held a press conference here in order to, answer questions. And this kind of griping at the supporters at that level, like a week ago, seeing someone tear into Senator Blumenthal as words, not action, when Senator Blumenthal is a lead sponsor of bills to support Ukraine. I don't know what action you think is going to happen outside of that. I don't understand that. I find it counterproductive. So, and it's less energy being used to go at the various voices that go out of their way to make sure that they are inhibiting Ukraine. So maybe it feels fruitless to scream at Rubio now, or Vance, or whoever else. I understand that, but screaming at someone who literally physically comes to the country and tours through the country, does not simply stay in a hotel, but literally gets a helmet on and goes out to the regions most affected, like Senator Blumenthal did, is really, frankly, it's just stupid. And that particular account said, maybe I should go talk to, well, you should tell that to POWs and Ukrainians, or Ukrainian children. Like, okay, the account is a person out of Germany who's not even Ukrainian yelling at a guy who actually hangs out with former POWs, families of POWs, and it's something I've watched now for a few years, where this sort of emotional gesticulation is silly. There are great supporters out there doing really good, focused work. Please keep that up, and let's do our part to improve that. We got 7 folks in the listening space or viewing space with us right now, and Shaun will join us here in a minute. And, we want to make sure we keep coming to you with on-the-ground reporting, both from what we see that you see in the news and giving some context to it, but also there are times where we see things that are happening in the news, or happening in the country that are not in the news very well, and we want to make sure that those items are given to you. I am going to be going out east this next week. I hope everything is geared for that. I'm at the end of the month on a lot of the items, and we've done better on this platform, but there's still a small deficit in cutting the bills. Just putting that on the table. Um, Partially, like my business stuff needs to be on one side. I do media work, and that pays basically my journalistic work. But we are doing better on this platform than the other platforms have ever been supporting the overhead. I keep the overhead ridiculously low, but it is a thing. So for all those who can help, you know how to contact me, and we will make sure that that comes together. Not going to be in a panic state about it. And again, I'm very thankful that on this platform we have reached 600 subscribers, of which there's 38 paid subscribers. I see some that are literally in the space with us. And I want to say thank you to you. You are one of the groups of people who make it happen, and you should take some credit and responsibility for the success of what does come together. So thank you very much. I actually pass that on behalf of the people around. Um, and yes, you'll be above 1,000 soon. I have no doubt. Coming up Monday, we're going to have John Jackson talk about his visit to Ubiquity, his work here in Ukraine, and a great conversation with a guy who is a really good buddy. Got to meet him here in country a couple of years ago, and watch him on a regular basis, and he's very great supporter, vice versa. Then on Friday, of course, we'll have Shaun, and then I'm just pinning in when we will have um, some other guests that I think are really awesome, including I'm hoping we're going to have Mark Zaid join us. We are going to have Mark Zaid join us. I just don't know the timing, so that's what I mean by that. And then Decoding Fox News, same thing. We're going to bring Decoding Fox News on to talk about the propaganda that the right wing has been using there and why it matters. 16 years ago when I was running my small podcast, and it was played on some different shows in Houston and abroad about torture and the Cheney administration, etc. Even though it was the Obama administration by then, but we were still talking about the torture regimes, etc. I always did a Media Matters segment because I think that when people are brain screwed from that propaganda, it shows up in the results of the world around us. So we have to do what we can to listen to people who watch Fox News so you don't have to. Good day to you. Good day to everyone who's joined us. And let's see if we can't get. I always love when I'm trying to open up. I'm trying to open up Signal to see messages, and I have to wait a few minutes for it to propagate all the messages. Um, Shaun will be popping in here in a minute. And again, I called him a while ago. He was on yet another interview. Been very busy week here. I did a 5-hour stream on the 24th. I did a 5-hour stream last night, about 4 hours and 45 minutes. And last night we only got to cover the defender side. And so I have an entire segment tonight. It's already preloaded. I'm going to probably add a couple more tweaks in it, and it'll be ready to go. But unlike the last two, where I'm literally writing all day long, cutting, translating, trying to encode, you name it, so that it doesn't lag, all that stuff. Mostly it's ready to go. You're going to hear from the Empty Chairs event of captive journalists who were held and released. You're going to hear from Christina Shkudor about the Crimean captives and captive children, with some commentary from Katerina Reshevska. And then we will feature the full Anatoly Harahati documentary or news presentation we did. The work with Alex Salamaka to go interview Anatoly in Savensi was life-changing for me. I think you'll really find him to be a beautifully sweet man. And he is totally kicking my ass on YouTube, which is awesome. Molodets. He is a videographer who was held in captivity. And in let me be very clear, in occupation. He's from Savensi, which is between Balaklia and Izum. And for 100 days, he was held by the Russians in a confinement cell there in Balaklia. and tortured 8 times. And you will hear his story tonight. It's been previously published on YouTube, but honestly, no one saw it. So about 168 people watch it. I feel we have to cut through this stuff. We have to cut through. Unfortunately, even with the supporters, we have to cut through the memes and the funny haha stuff about things going boom. I totally get it. I used to wake up in the morning and turn on my Telegram account, and my friends at the cafe would laugh. What are you watching? And I'm watching the attacks on the tanks and the BMPs, and that's great. I totally get it. But if we're not seeing the voices of the people that have gone through hell here and tune them out, you know, and also if anyone personalizes it as my videos, which is something that gets said sometimes with people, I'm sorry, I didn't show your video. These are not my videos. These are our videos about Ukrainians, featuring Ukrainians, entirely Ukrainians. You can't even tell I'm in the shot. I'm sitting there running the cameras. I always filmed with Ukrainians talking to Ukrainians, and until 2026, I didn't even get on camera. You had to work to get me on camera. I don't like it. It's not my nature of it. It's fine what it is right now. Even now, staring at if you ever sat at a desk and stared at a phone and talked to a phone, it's very surreal. Before I came here and I did counterterrorism work, and I would be on Canadian television, BBC or something, I had a producer in my ear right beforehand. We'll be going on in 5 minutes, Chris. Are you ready? Yeah, that's fine. Any additional questions you want to ask beforehand? No, we're good. All right. See you in 5 minutes. Okay, thanks. And you sit there and wait, and you listen to the headlines of what's going on. Then all of a sudden, you have to sit up straight and you have to get really serious and say, well, what we have today is at least a mass shooting. We're waiting for information from the investigators to find out why this person has done this. But I'm pretty sure the investigators will. And you stare in a blank phone, then you turn the phone off and you go back to your day. It's not natural. I would prefer to sit in a room, hear people, talk to people, and listen to what they're saying. This is why I liked Spaces on a certain level. I think it's not as productive as it was, um, some time ago. And to those who are doing that, for instance, I see mockers here and some others. That's great. Keeping a consistent footing there. I have no problem with that. I'm just saying that the platform is not rigged to help us. So this platform is.
Hey.
And then we got our homie out there on the line. What's up, my man? You getting some technical thing?
Oh, signal's really grumpy.
Signals grumpy. Yeah, it is. It's trying to cut out.
It's a little bit ropey out here, the signal at the moment. So I've had to come out. I've had to come out. There's camera crew in
Yes.
the camera crew in the kitchen.
Oh. So let's see if we can get your information to stabilize there. Let's see. It's stabilizing. It's stabilizing. What you want to go to audio only? Maybe does it speed up if it's audio only? We think you're beautiful, of course, but
I can't hear you. Hold on. I'll come back. 2 seconds.
Okay, no problem. And the fact that we can even broadcast in war is really a good thing. I appreciate that. And like next week, I don't know what the contact will be like when we get out there, but we will try. I'm going to send another invite just to make sure homie can get his way back in. And it's not easy. In fact, during blackouts, I happen to have electricity right now. It came on just a little while ago, a little over an hour ago. But during blackouts, there are times when I get to the street level and there is no communication system, and that's really dangerous. I know that, in 2023, I want to say late in 2023 in the summer, they tried to work on that. How are we doing? Better? Oh, yeah.
That's better.
You're a little less digitized.
Yeah, I've had all the best laid plans have just gone out the window, to be fair.
That's how it is. So let's give our good friends some reports. What is on your mind for the week of 4 years full-scale invasion, a few days into year 5 of that, and year 13 of the long term?
Well, 4 years in, not much has changed, has it? Apart from the fact that Ukraine have got in a better position to fight this war.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the innovations being made to build the rockets and the ammunition needed to fight Russia has increased to about 40%. Russia, I don't see actually breaking through. So I think we're going to see more of a financial and political war going on now, more so than ever. I'm actually in the Isle of Man at the moment, so I'm a little bit. I'm doing a talk tonight about it. So it's good rehearsal at the moment. I was trying to get you some good backdrop scenery, but it all went a bit wrong at the moment.
It's a bit remote, huh?
Yeah,
Manx technology.
Manx technology. Yeah, the signal keeps kicking out, so it's like dead spots. So it did go to plan, which is why I'm a bit late. But yeah, I think essentially, I think we're in a better position than we were 2 years ago. I think we're literally in a position to fight this war, provided we're getting the support, and the support seems to be coming this week. There's the monetary fund has just given something like 8 billion. You've got the 90 billion loan, looks like it's going to go through too. That's another 2 years worth of finances. America posturing, I think now, I suppose, would be the best, putting some pressure on Zelensky to end this war. And Rubio's comments about
I mean, I don't know why he started I don't know why he started the war in the first place, right? I mean, let's pressure the guy who started the war, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's mixed messages again for the Trump administration, and more so, their visits to Hungary and Slovakia were really off-putting. So I think we're in a better position. Whether we got the man in to continue this, I don't know. Obviously, a bit of critic of that. I don't know if we've got the man in to actually keep going forever. But I mean, they're sort of saying that the Manning's okay, but you hear reports on the front line in Ukraine that there's a severe lack of Manning. Certainly, friends I know are saying that in areas. So,
the IMF approved 8.1 billion extended fund facility for Ukraine as part of a 136 billion international support package. Immediate disbursement, and then of course, Hungary tried to block the 90 billion euro loan package. And Canada announced 2 billion in military aid. NATO secured 2 billion in Pearl. And the UK announced 30 million funding for Ukrainian infrastructure, humanitarian energy, and humanitarian support. Norway has pledged 8 billion kroner for 2026. EU proposed another 920 million euro package. Poland's 44 billion EU safe loan is at risk over U.S. ties. These are some of the things I've got together. And the G7 pledges an additional power capacity of over 500 million euros for the Energy Ukraine Fund. So active.
Yeah, I mean, Europe's stepping up. They're now, the thing that annoyed me was Rubio's comments that we're supplying Ukraine with weapons. They're not, essentially. They're no new packages have really come to light, apart from I think it was 800 million to Pearl, which is a very small package. And, that's NATO buying the weapons. You don't go to a car show, or you don't buy a second-hand car and then realize when you buy it, it still belongs to the showroom. It's Ukraine, that's Europe funding this war. It's Europe helping Ukraine. So, America's stepping back. It's doing less and less. Obviously, we talked about before the pulling of humanitarian aid, and it's clearly interfering now. The Trump administration are interfering with politics, supporting right-wing movements. Even Tommy Robinson's gone over to the Trump administration. And that's really bad news. The guy's a criminal at the end of the day, convicted criminal. So, it's just where the Trump administration is I think the popularity of the midterms have crushed that anyway. I hope so. I hope these really crushed, because it's he's causing problems everywhere.
Yeah. Also, I want to mention that Sweden committed 4 billion euros in 2026 aid to Ukraine as well. This last week, I was saying before you came on, this last week, Ursula von der Leyen came here, and I noticed within no time there were I might use the word supporters in quotes because your support is based on your actions, not your screaming. But not did you didn't do enough, and you didn't make this happen. When in fact she comes here on a regular basis, and you know that
Yeah.
there are a bunch of delegates who come here, officials who come from UK or coming from the United States to physically stand with Ukraine and go across the country. Since you've been here for a while, what do you think that means, or how do you interpret that on the ground when you see like Senator Blumenthal down in Odessa or Mykolaiv or the regions that are greatly affected, not just hanging out in the hotels in Kyiv?
I excuse me. I think it's a good thing.
Hmm.
We got to keep pushing on the Trump administration. There's a very large support for Ukraine.
Hmm.
I think it's pardon the phrase. I think there's a lot of pissing in the wind. I think Trump's made his decision. I
Yeah.
think he's supporting Russia as much as he can. Excuse me. So I don't know. I think we have to just rule out America completely, and let them push their own agendas. I think they should take. I mean, I honestly think there is absolutely no peace plan now. I
Hmm.
just don't see it. Witkoff saying one thing, Putin's then coming along saying, we're going to take back the territories. We're launching more offensives. There's no peace. From the Russian side, they've got no interest in peace whatsoever. So, I think Witkoff's. My views on that. Witkoff's selling all these great there's peace, Zelensky could meet with Putin. Even Putin this week said or pet my brain's gone catching up now, but even they said Russia said this week that's highly unlikely that's ever going to happen. It would
Right.
mean that if that did happen, the Russians, who have called the government illegitimate and a Nazi regime, would then be legitimizing
Right.
Zelensky by actually meeting him, Putin actually meeting him. Does he want to meet him? We all know that's not going to happen, but Witkoff seems to think it is. So, I mean, he's so detached from reality of what's actually going on. He's never been to Ukraine. So for me, I mean, Witkoff's a joke. Kushner, Witkoff, an absolute joke. And now it looks like, America's going to go to war with Iran. The curveball here, that's another, Putin ally.
Right.
It's
Right.
that's a real curveball. So if they do go to war with Iran, that's the peace deal and peace talks over. And what I've said all along since last February, since his inauguration, Trump's not interested in peace. Far too many people are making
Trump's.
money out of it.
I always tell people Trump's interested in Trump
Yeah,
staying out of jail.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about let's go to your soldier side. What were some of the things that stood out this week? Let's start with the Ukrainian strikes on energy facilities in Belgorod and occupied Luhansk, etc. What anything there that you want to comment on?
I've been sort of had a bit of a digital detox this week. I've been
Ah, good
traveling,
man.
so I've literally been traveled to the Isle of Man. It
That's
took a
right.
bit of an effort to get in, so I've missed a couple of days of news. My editors also give me a bit of a chillax. Said just
Right.
get your energy levels back up and come back. So I've taken a bit of a few days off. So I think probably better next Friday I'll be able to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
normal.
Well, let me give you one that does concern me, and came in
Go on.
that this week we had an FPV drone make its way all the way to Kharkiv. I'm not sure how far into Kharkiv, but
Wow, I didn't know that.
the Kharkiv Regional Prosecutor's Office announced that one of those that are remember these are now optical tethers, had gotten further in, and I can see if I can find where. Um, yeah, it was a damage further. Let me see if it says the where in Kharkiv region. First, a Russian FPV drone reached Ukraine's Kharkiv region on Tuesday, marking the first time Ukraine had detected this type of drone in that region. The Kharkiv prosecutor's office said in a statement, drone hit a tree, no injuries reported. But, the greater point is that we had FPVs that were remote radio signals, etc., and then moved to optical, and then now for the last over 2 years at least, we've seen that distance go further and further, thus expanding the kill zone.
Yeah, I mean, you got to mix in. There's a big propaganda war at the moment too. Just
Right.
flying one drone in a distance, a significant distance, doesn't mean they've got the capability to do that all the way across the front line. They may have found an area where the electronic countermeasures are weaker, or may have found that. That's what they do. That's what militaries do, is to find weaknesses, reconnaissance those, recon those, and hit those logistics places. And this could be part of it, but really, Russian propaganda, in my view, is struggling to bridge the gap between what was promised in 2022 and now. The swagger's gone, as I called it. They're generally fighting fires, and now it's going back to old Soviet doctrine because they're struggling. We had nuclear threats this week, dirty bombs. We had. This is all stuff. If you're an 80s kid like me,
we had three terrorist attacks. We had 3 terrorist attacks as well. The one that in Lviv we talked about at the beginning of the week when we were covering that, and then right behind that there was a gas station attack in Mykolaiv, and then another attack, I believe, in Odessa. Yeah,
Yeah.
The other type of war.
They do go on. They just don't make the heads. So they do go on. These were 2 or 3 significant ones,
Right.
But they do go on anyway. People don't really hear it. The torching of military vehicles and bombs going certainly off, car bomb going off in Dnipro. So they don't make the news so much. These ones did. The Lviv one especially did make the news because of the callous nature of it. I mean, the woman did it for 60,000 hryvnia. I mean, now she's got to do life in prison. Yes, I mean, is it worth it?
Right.
So, I mean, it's this goes on anyway. We keep talking about the fact that people come here and don't realize you're in a war. This isn't a green zone in Baghdad. This is a full-scale war. Sympathizers, spies, espionage, cyber attacks, satellite imagery.
I've told every Westerner, keep head on swivel. This is why, I'm not someone who's afraid of dying per se, but I'm not going to be stupid and go out and let's make myself the biggest target in the universe by being a loudmouth on the camera. And, it feels good to scream for Ukraine in a great way, but you have to keep head on swivel. It is a war all the way to the border.
No, it is, yeah. And people generally come here thinking it's, even a lot of the military come here thinking it's a green zone and dress like they're Westerners, stick out like a sore thumb. And, it only takes a terrorist incident, a bomb going off in a hotel, and you've killed a lot of people. So, you've got to be really careful when you come to Ukraine and understand that it is actually a war. And, Russia will do anything, especially now it's under some serious pressure economically, politically, I would say too. Ukraine isn't Ukraine it was in 2022. It's now firing 200 drones and ballistics daily into Russia, hitting.
Right.
You imagine doing that in 2022 with Biden and escalation. It just wouldn't happen. Now it's a full scale, what we call drone ping pong. It's
full on slugfest. Throw everything at it.
Yeah, and they'll do anything. I mean, look at the White Foss that's just in Konstantinivka.
Right.
The White Foss that's going off in there. I mean, that's not new. They did that in Mariupol. They did that at Bakhmut. They're not interested in saving the Russian speakers. They're killing them. So, as much as many as they can. So, this is a genocide. We've always said it is a genocide of Ukrainian people. I don't want to sound like a defeatist because I'm not. I don't think there's going to be peace. But I do think Ukraine is in a better position to stand firm and hold firm and fight their corner. And they've taken back, according to Zelensky, 400 square kilometers. So, that's a lot of ground they've taken back that Russia has expended so many troops to try and get, and spent a long time trying to get it. So it is, things are a lot better this year for Zelensky in Ukraine than they were probably, say, this time last year.
If you folks that are in the space, I see we've got some great friends who have joined in. If you have some comments, we'll go a little bit more. And I know Shaun's got a lot of interviews going on, and that's why you're there, is to basically do messaging. So pop them down in here, and we'll try to get in some of them. Another one I want to talk about is that you got to meet with our good brother Dimko, and we're going to do a really nice extended interview. What have you learned from some of these conversations that maybe the audience can appreciate?
Well, Dimko's a leading expert on drone warfare, especially in this sort of environment. And I would say he's a great person to listen to. Drones are not my specialty, so I'm really excited to go and we're going to go and talk to him, and we'll probably learn a lot from him. Actually, but the drone wall is, you still need infantry. You still need troops. So I think this is this really what many of us are just concerned about, is, do we have enough infantry, enough troops to keep going? Certainly, Dimko is going to be an excellent person to talk about drone innovation and where we sit and what's happening there. He's a great guy. He's
just
really
an nice
ordinary guy. He is. He's just an ordinary guy. But this is endemic of Ukraine. These are IT workers and car salesmen, and who are now fighting a war as soldiers. So this is where I'm really interested to talk to Dimko about that. About he's got a book, An Ordinary Man. So it's quite interesting. I'm just reading it now. It's quite interesting to hear how a family man keeps its family together in this time. It's amazing to hear people talk about going home to their wife, kids, and dogs, and and then going back to the battlefield. It's heroic shit, to be honest, and the daily life for Ukrainians. So yeah, I'm really excited for us to go and talk to him.
Again, thank you everyone who's joining us. We're doing a short, guaranteed. We're going to always try to come to you on Friday, but next Friday you'll be more settled and back at a normal pace. We'll do our 9 p.m. broadcast where we sit down, and we actually do this where we have a producer sheet, make sure we cover all the bases. One more thing that I know that had popped in the news was that Russia was running off at the mouth, saying that NATO was deploying nukes, and the disinformation that was at that level. And then also there was one of the guys got up, I guess it was Russian ambassador to the UN, I don't have the full clip in front of me, saying that well, I'm Ukrainian, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, it's garbage. Load of garbage.
And the lady responded, "You're not Ukrainian." Let's talk about it from this the way the phrase goes down. Ukraine, the liberal Russians are only liberal to the question of Ukraine comes up.
Oh man, it's all linked in. All this propaganda now, especially regarding NATO. NATO was the reason that Putin cut Western social media into Russia. It was NATO's now driving the repression that's going on there. Putin only wants to make his audience smaller. He's struggling, as I said before, on the propaganda front. He's now fighting fires. You're going to hear a more growth in. We're now at war with NATO. When NATO soldiers aren't actually even in Ukraine. Most Russians, you hear, they think they're at war with NATO. But the flip side of that is that a lot of Russian mill bloggers, more than we've ever seen, are now asking why. Which is exactly why he's pulled in Western social media, WhatsApp, Telegram, as well. So he wants control. He knows that he's losing the narrative. He knows already that people don't believe there's Nazis in you. We're not a Nazi country.
Actually, I want to deal with that. I referenced this last night, and I mentioned you. I was talking about how my friend Natalie Kritsova and Yana and these other ladies I know whose sons are in Azov in captivity, how there's that bias, in a hateful bias in the Russian camp itself, but also that the disinformation sphere about Azov has created a crisis for those guys who are in captivity, where there's an ignorance, even amongst supporters who come here. They're like, oh, I'll talk about this, I'll talk about that, but I'm, and it treats it like a hot rail. So, because you were here for a long time, can you more perfectly explain what I was getting at last night with saying you have to be around the guys to understand how absurd this assertion is? Would you mind putting some words to that?
Yeah, I've just done it for somebody else actually today,
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
weirdly. So look, a nationalist has a different meaning wherever you go. I can't find a soldier in any military that isn't a nationalist. That you don't
Right.
tend to get people who serve their country who are not nationalists. Russia's propaganda sphere pushes nationalists as Nazis, ultra nationalists as Nazis, which is crap. It's bollocks.
Right.
In my year, I served as instructor for 2 years with Azov, and in my ranks were Crimean Tatar, some Jews. Can we say Jews? Jewish lads
Yeah.
of origin, plenty of those. And you've got, now legally fighting for the National Guard and Azov Americans and the people from the
Right.
West. Are they all Nazis? No. you know, there are some. I'm not going to tell you they're not here, but you find me an army that doesn't have that sort of, especially the American
Right.
army.
Right.
You try and find me an army that doesn't have any extreme views, soldiers that have extreme
That's
views.
exactly the
You won't
point.
find
Like
one.
yeah, in America, I had an entire listing before I came here of, especially because of Jan 6, of extreme right wing all the way to neo Nazis that were in the U.S. military, but we still would not wake up in the morning and say that the U.S. military is a big, Nazi
Nazi
rally.
regime, yeah,
You
it's
know,
not,
not,
and
yeah,
and
maybe
part of
under
it,
Trump, but not the military.
Azov was its own worst enemy. Is that it didn't fight the Russian propaganda anyway. It was dreadful at it because it wanted Russians to fear Azov. So it was own worst enemy. They sort of leaned into a lot of it. Did we crucifix children? No. Did we crucify children? No. Did we have we harvested body parts? All these things I've been hearing since 2018. These are
Right.
not new. Yeah, there's no proof. It's all a bit sketchy. I certainly didn't see it. Did I see some suspect tattoos? Probably. But what was there, like, ideology and pushed on me? No, never saw it one day.
Right.
I was dealing with, it's a good brand. It's if you want to fight, you want to fight with the best kit, the guys that are innovative, who want to bring in new tactics, understand new tactics. Azov was it during those
Also,
days.
you're home before the full scale invasion, being in occupation. And I mentioned this about the other Marines who were from Berdyansk and those areas, places you in Azov location. Like I'm from the Gulf of Mexico area of Houston,
Mm.
so I'm a Gulf resident. I like if someone said, "Well, aren't you a bit of a Gulf resident?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say I'm a Great Lakes resident if I was, that would be if I was in Michigan or Wisconsin, right? So I think that really shows that. And then the second part is that in 2014, because the army had been depleted under Yanukovych, whoever could show up was made useful.
Yeah, to be honest, you had two armies by the time I got there in
Mm.
2018. You had a
Hmm.
very NATO forward looking Azov, who innovative, wanted to learn NATO tactics. Very brotherhood there is
Hmm.
probably the best I've seen. They were very patriotic. Like somebody just said, patriotic isn't extremism. But Russia would have you believe that, they're trying to latch onto anything to undermine one of the best fighting units in Ukraine. So, that's all part of the propaganda.
Right.
And like I touched on, Azov weren't too good at, didn't really, they sort of leaned into a lot of it,
Right.
essentially. But the stigma in the Western media is one of the most successful propaganda jobs Russia did, was
Sadly, it
to
is.
try and
Yeah.
convince Azov was a solely Nazi, you know, uh, brigade, which is
Right.
not true. Um, and now it's
I said
definitely
it
not.
was. I said it was like in naming sake. It was like how Atomwaffen Division sounds, which is an actual neo-Nazi group of a bunch of fucking idiots from Texas, etc., and throughout the South. how that was somehow equivalent to Azov battalion. And so,
Azov just means Azov
yeah,
Sea, for those that don't know.
exactly,
It's not
exactly.
anything sinister.
But we had analysts, including some quality analysts who made mistakes, who later changed their rhetoric in 2022 after they reassessed what they were saying and realized there were consequences. So yeah, it's a big deal. Hey, we've got the possible release tomorrow. I'm not sure if it'll be tomorrow, but there was a few texts running around that saying after the release or after the negotiations settled this week, there would probably be a release. And Bogdanov specifically was on video and interviews this week saying so. So, as a man who came home from captivity, I know that that's a big deal to you, and we'll go out and cover that, of course.
Mm. Now, I mean, Dennis has just been promoted to brigadier general, so
Wow.
the guy in charge of Azov. So, I mean, he's a hearted man. I've served under him. I fought with him. I knew him.
Mm-hmm.
Not as a friend or anything. He was just my superior officer. So, but he led from the front. I mean, he's a hardened guy, and people follow that. It's a good promotion. So, he's a Azov is were looked upon as heroes in Mariupol. They were they fought against overwhelming odds. They clawed back Mariupol just
Right.
before the full scale invasion. They pushed them all the way pretty much 12 kilometers past Mariupol back to Russia. So one of the reasons that people don't really know is that just before the invasion, there was talk about plans to push a mission to encircle Donetsk, and we were making inroads towards the Russian border, which is what kick-started decisions to launch a full-scale invasion. The Russians who had invaded East Ukraine, and I don't call them separatists, they're Russians at the end of the day, were being pushed back. So they were supported. Where I tell people this all the time. Where do you think their armored vehicles come from? Their artillery pieces, their soldiers. They came in from Russia. They weren't separatists. They were Russian.
Right. Exactly.
Ukraine was a training ground for Russian special forces that wanted to break. They were trying new tech, in Ukraine. So it was a training polygon for the Russians, Ukraine at that time. So they were pouring across the little green men, poured across the border. One of the best people, sort of investigative journalism pieces I saw was, Vice News at the time, who pictured,
Mm-hmm.
The Russian soldiers in Ukraine and then followed them back to Russia, which was incredibly dangerous. Simon Trzaskowski did some good work there doing that. So, I tell people to watch that, and you can see the Russian soldiers coming across the
100
border.
and something dispatches. I've studied them relentlessly because you can slow them down and really take notes of commentary. You can see the pro-Russian, the Zhinka, the women who come out. They sound like pigeons or something. The way that they ramp up in propaganda, you can tell it's propaganda chatter coming out of their mouths.
Yeah.
So I know you got to get back to your interviews and such. We're going to do this shorter brief today in order to make sure everyone hears.
Yeah, I do apologise. Back to normal next week, but I'm actually raising money for Prevail, who are in Ukraine. Chris Swampy Garrett, who died last year, an EOD guy, died on the front lines working there. So we're trying to keep his legacy going here, and we've got 70 people tonight, another 100 tomorrow. So we're going to have a good couple of evenings talking about Ukraine and doing some auctions and raffles, and all of it's going towards Prevail and Courtney, who's Chris's partner, and their daughter Reed. I'm staying with them at the moment, and we're going to be hopefully raising some good money for and Manx Support, who are doing do a lot of good work for and supplying medical aid and vehicles to Ukraine, and also help Prevail too. So it's going to be a good event. It's pretty morbid subject to talk about, so we have a bit of humor thrown in. But if people go away, it's not the event that's really the event's important, but it's when they go away and that ripple effect takes place, and they go and talk to their friends and say, "I was at this talk last night." You'll never guess what. And if they go away shocked, then we've done a good job of telling them what's going on in Ukraine. So Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it tonight at
Well,
7:45.
send my best to Courtney. I gave her a hug when we were at the funeral, and
Yeah, I
I
will do.
said, guys like me would stay on the case, and we know what it requires. Munitions, unexploded ordnance here is a huge, catastrophe of eco-terrorism as well.
Yeah.
And when the civilians return to their buildings, any number of different ways that the experts had to be brought in to disarm those munitions was invaluable. And of course, we miss Swampy
Mm.
and
Yeah.
his colleague who was killed, and then the work that was set back by having such an expert taken from us. Send our best that way, and then
I will do.
we will.
Yeah, I will
Yeah,
do. I'm gonna get some video, and I'm seeing the governor of the Isle of Man on Monday, which is quite cool. I've been invited
excellent.
there today. So yeah, we're keeping up the good work, and then I'll be back in Ukraine hopefully at the end of next week. So I'm just gonna
Very
go and see
good.
the family for a couple of days and chill out with some friends, hopefully. So
Hey, I ran Bama's piece last night that I recorded
he's a good
for us.
lad.
So
He's a
yeah,
good. I
yeah,
spent a lot of time in captivity with him. He's gone through SEER training too, so he knows. He's a very capable person and a really good storyteller. Good to have around when the shit goes down. He's got a great sense of humour.
yeah.
So you need him on to talk to you.
Don't forget, everyone, follow Sean's account if you're not already. And if you are following that account and you haven't done so, consider at least the $5 subscription plan so that Sean's focused more on the stories than on the budget.
It all goes towards keeping us in Ukraine, to be fair.
Pretty much keeps it working. Thank you,
Keeps
my
it
man.
working. All right, man.
See you
Goodbye to
soon.
everyone. I'll see you next Friday.
Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
And again, we will tonight go to the live broadcast at 11 p.m. Kyiv time, when I will bring the civilian side of the war of the last 4 years to you, with its stories of the journalists who were in captivity, the Empty Chairs event with Mitchell Kaliuk and the others. And then I have a few surprise segments, like maybe you like pets. My friend Natalia and Phil Air drove across the country in the first year to deliver a Sprinter van full of dog food and cat food and supplies that were easily forgotten in the middle of trying to take care of humans. So we'll have that on there. And it'll probably be a good, 3 or 4 hours worth of footage again, which means I'll go to bed like I did last night at 4:30, almost 5 o'clock in the morning, just because I want to make sure you get to see this footage. And also, because after 4 years, I want to kind of not focus on that past material as much. I want to really do as we're doing now, currently filming here with new stories. We just mentioned the conversation that Shaun had with Dimko, and I will go down and film an interview with those guys. And my drone builder filmmaker friend is here to do so. We'll be heading out to the east to Kharkiv, and your support is invaluable to that. Even if it's a base free subscription, it's a subscription nonetheless. If you can do the $5 subscription, deeply appreciated. If you can do more than the $5, yearly and or higher, please consider doing so, because then we are more focused on the content than the budget. And it is the end of the month, and it is a shorter month. I woke up this morning going, well, let's see, we got this. Oh, no, we don't. It's February. And I pull up the app, and domains have been paid off, and the various end of the month fees. So we're doing better because of being on this platform than we were on the other, where pretty much nothing was happening. Patreon is down to $35 per month. I worked hard to get it up to a workable budget for journalism, and I totally understand how people's budgets are. It went so on this one, it's doing a little bit better. Also, there are new people who did not even know that I was doing the work here and are crossing over from the other conversations. So I appreciate those who have signed on recently and just found out what I've been doing or what we've been doing here. Don't forget, throughout next week, we will have interviews every night. I will not be doing the same live or the same, video segments version of footage like I did this week. And we have John Jackson on Monday. Of course, we have Shaun on Friday, but in the middle of the week, we have Decoding Fox News. We will put in that timeline. Dennis Glushko is likely to be in one of those. Mark Zaid is scheduled. I have Fred Wellman coming to join us in the near future. There's a whole bunch of friends in. Um, in email form and text form where we're just trying to coordinate our timing. And again, the more that this platform goes up in numbers, it's a lot easier for someone who's on that side to see the numbers and see it increase. And I'm going to point out to you, we are at 18 followers or 18, 18, not even, I don't know, followers or subscribers in December when I booted this up late, and I wasn't really exploiting this platform for its information options, and then we did, and we are already at just over 600 now. So thank you for all who are doing so. The views on YouTube, pretty much only the shorts, the long form videos, 1, 2 views. People are not wired to do that. Even with me, I know if you said sit down and watch a 45-minute interview, I have difficulty being able to budget the time to go do so. So I get it. My friend Arturo Escuel, who was actually featured last night with Anastasia, just got a really great interview I'm going to be working on in the background that was published in that account that he's on. It's a Ukrainian account that's published on, has 27,000 views in 24 hours, under 24 hours. And we struggle to get any focus on the Ukrainian voices we cover. And that disparity can be reached by just trying harder. And we will always do so. We don't have the luxury of quitting here. I live in Ukraine. I am not traveling back and forth as someone who I don't know if he's in the space here this time, but one of my friends who called me yesterday, I told him, I said, I have been taking a vacation the entire time I've been here in 4 years. And he was a little surprised, not even to like Zakarpattia. Going to Zakarpattia would cut into the time I need to focus on what's in front. Even today, furiously writing articles, planning for the live stream tonight, and there's just never a shortage of things to do around here. I also want to wish Zim Narodzina to my friend Mikhailo Hirskevich, who's the father of Vladislav, the Olympian. Today, as Vladislav said, Zim Narodzina Tako. It's also the birthday of my friend who's his father, and so we wish him a wonderful happy birthday, and thank you for making such a good Ukrainian young man that has spoken well for the country. And so we'll see you several hours from now. It's 3:43 my time, and I will go live with the broadcast by then. See you soon. Slava Ukraini, Heroim Slava и Пиздец Російській Федерації.